As an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Thursday, on a Halloween Thursday. Welcome to it on Rumble. Rumble.com/AmRadPod is where you can always find us on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 08:30 Eastern Time, noontime Eastern on Saturday. If you're here with us, do smash the thumbs up and follow the channel. If you listen to the podcast on iTunes and Spotify and iHeart, subscribe there so you can get the new shows as we drop them to you, and be sure to give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to trick the algorithm into introducing the American Radicals Podcast to a wider audience. It's all a scam to get people informed and educated, especially about the stuff we're going to talk about today. Today is about monumental failures. What do I mean? I mean that we're going to be spreading the hate and the love to the federal law enforcement agencies like the FBI, Homeland Security, Secret Service, all of them, because we have had some great examples recently that we're going to dig into and laugh at, or maybe cry at, or maybe just shake our head in disbelief. Who knows? It's a Halloween. I'm just hopefully not going to get too scared by my co-host. And should you be very disturbed as well, that is not a mask. For those listening,
the mask is off, actually, Steve.
Garrett O'Boyle, find him at GOB Actual Proof of Life. Decided to give himself a little bit of a trim, looking nice and clean. Didn't get all the way there. I'm still the face of the franchise.
I couldn't go fully shaven. I've not done that in quite some time, and I'll save it for when I go full jihad someday in the future. But yeah, had to trim her down a little bit. And now we'll just let it grow back for winter.
It's just a cycle. It's like a cycle of failure that we're going to get into today. It seems to be never ending.
Indeed.
Garrett's beard and our ex-girlfriend's failures, which we're going to get into. So let's kick it off, because we got to churn and burn. We got a bunch of them, and I'm excited to get to them all. I do not want to leave anybody shorthanded here. 59-minute rule is in effect. Let's get to it right off the bat. First one comes from the Daily Mail, and it's about U.S. intelligence community. And parenthetically, that involves our ex-girlfriend. Actually, the first two pieces involve the intelligence community. And as always, we were right. U.S. intelligence fears insider attacks on the election are likely. Well, what kind of insider are they talking about? So there's a new U.S. intelligence memo warning that insider threats will likely be an issue in November 5th election, centering on then they could derail or jeopardize a fair and transparent election. Quote, due to the nature of the U.S. elections process, many people are involved in administering or carrying out responsibilities that support elections, all of whom have a potential to be an insider threat, unquote. Now, you would think that they're talking about poll workers or people that are spinning the ones and the zeros, the dials on the voting machines. but they really bury the lead here. So if you dig through it, you get this quote, which I think is relevant to the discussion today. Quote, targeted violence and terrorism associated with ideologically motivated individuals will continue to be a threat through the 2024 election cycle. And that is setting us up for the narrative that we discussed with the Afghani parolee, one of the 100,000 who the United States flew into the country unvetted. He was working for the CIA, another monumental failure there. And then the FBI, wouldn't you know it, arrested him on October 7th because their intelligence said something was going to happen that day. I don't know. They had planned an arrest for that day, and they arrested him. And it was another entrapment scheme that we've talked about before. Vulnerable person, poke him with an informant, undercover, boom, spring the trap. But his plot, or the plot that the FBI had arranged for him, was to attack these polling locations, making them vulnerable to an attack. So before I get your thought, I want to connect it to the second story, and then we'll react because this one comes from NBC News, who only reports the truth. Extremists inspired by conspiracy theories pose major threat to the 2024 election. U.S. intelligence warns.
Of course they do.
U.S. intel agencies have identified domestic extremists with grievances. What kind of grievances, Garrett? Could they be a perception of overreach,
Yes.
negligence, or illegitimacy, agave like? The grievances rooted in election-related conspiracy theories, including beliefs in widespread voter fraud and animosity towards perceived political opponents, are the most likely threat of violence in the coming elections. There's more here, but there's a lot of avenues to take this one. We can go agave, we can go intel setting up a narrative. Where do you want to take it? And then I'll go off of you.
Man, I don't even know. Other than, for me, right off the bat, it's just this rhetoric. Like, it's insane. I don't, whichever way the election goes, I'm just going to be happy when it's over. But it seems like this happens every election cycle, especially the big ones, because Americans apparently want some type of king for some reason. But presidential elections, the last, well, man, I guess since Trump ran the first time, it just seems like the rhetoric is getting amplified more and more and more and more. That's not good. That's not good at all. Just recently, we saw the Madison Square Garden and being conflated with Nazism. It's always the Nazi issue. Donald Trump is a Nazi. He's literally Hitler. And I saw a clip yesterday of Kamala Harris, I think, talking within the last few days about how she said that Donald Trump literally wants to use the military to go after his enemies. And it's like, none of this is true. And then you have a headline like this that says conspiracy theorists and extremists. Okay, do those people exist? Sure, they do. They exist. But to the point where they're going to have a meaningful impact on our election? I mean,
There's another element too of using the vocabulary and not your dictionary. What is an extremist? Well, you have a conspiracy theory about the election. No, I have questions that might have pertained to some level of fraud. Well, the FBI stood up an election crimes unit, which is a whole other avenue we can take this because the
mhm.
FBI election crimes unit does not investigate any sort of election fraud. They just say we investigate election crimes. And most Americans think that means that, oh, there could be some malfeasance going on. Maybe they're messing with the machines. Maybe they're counting and they're maybe in the dead of night, they're bringing in a whole bunch of ballots. The DOJ, my moles, multiple moles have told me, has said nationwide, we will not investigate election fraud. We're
Right.
going to investigate threats to the poll workers.
Yeah.
We're going to investigate voter suppression, which is non existent, but they just say election crime. So you're an extremist now if you have legitimate questions about, like, that seems a little bit funky. I mean, it seems to me that it's odd that Nevada would be counting votes 3 days later that are dated post the election.
That
Seems
seems
like that's
weird.
kind of maybe cheating going on there. Oh, you're an extremist. Are you questioning the government's legitimacy? You might be a domestic terrorist that we should really hone in on. Let's get our crosshairs on that person.
Yeah, and on top of that too, it's since when in America are we not allowed to question things? That's was literally one of the main purposes of our founding documents. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights is to question government when we do perceive that there is government overreach. And now the government that doesn't want you to question it is saying oh, that you have the hallmarks of being a conspiracy theorist and or an extremist just simply because you're questioning us. Well, yeah, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of being an American, is that if I do have a reasonable question to ask you or reasonable indicators of something that you're doing that's wrong, I should be able to bring that up without being labeled by you, the government, that I want to question, that I have every right to question. Now you're going to label me as an extremist and a conspiracy theorist because you don't like the train of my thought. Which, and that, I mean, where does it go from here? That goes certainly into Minority Report level pre-crime, and silencing of speech and silencing of dissent, which are all things that every American is supposed to enjoy with the liberty that we allegedly have, which seems to only be a modicum of that liberty that remains today. Because if you speak a certain type of language, if you step in line with the government instead of question them, well, then all is fair, all is great, all is well. Um, and I don't know, man. It's extremely frustrating with stories like this, because you mentioned the arrest of the Afghani that we flew here, that our government flew here, and now we can't. What can we question that piece? Can we question that aspect of why you're flying all of these Afghani nationals into our country that you haven't properly vetted? Or is it that you did properly vet them, but you wanted them here so you could stage your arrest on October 7th because you have an infatuation with the date because of what happened on a previous October 7th? And as you well know, Steve, I'm sure the round table in the conference room for that squad went something like this. Yeah, let's do the arrest on October 7th because, anniversaries and all, that's going to play well. It's going to brief well too. And so they do it. They stage it for that date, even though it has no legitimate significance to the actual
No, his
plot.
his alleged plot that they were actually setting up for him to participate in was going to be on November 5th. So it had nothing to do with that. Now, let me bounce this one off you. Let me proffer this idea and tell me if I'm a conspiracy theorist, or is this a narrative? Or is this an op? Okay. I've been saying for the better part of a year that we're going to have some sort of intelligence report come out from our ex-girlfriend. Someone in the intelligence community is going to say that the polling locations are a soft target for an attack. Maybe it's Russia. Maybe it's radical jihadists. Maybe it's radical conspiracy theorists who question the election outcomes. Whatever, it doesn't matter. And that narrative is going to go out there. And they're going to say, you should probably stay home and stay safe because your vote is non-essential. Or stay home, stay safe, mail in your ballot. But this report will be issued so late in the game. Oh, I don't know, maybe less than a week out from the
Yeah,
election itself.
exactly.
And then, not that it will impact people. I think people who want to go are going to crawl over broken glass to go and vote in person. But the narrative, the op has been set for them to say, you know what? There was a disenfranchisement because of that. We're going to have to go and collect votes post election day from people who would have gone. They were just scared. They were scared. They had to stay home, stay safe. We did, after all, give them that advice. It's incumbent on us to make sure that every vote counts in our sacred democracy. So, we should canvass in urban areas like in Detroit or Milwaukee or Minneapolis, maybe down in the hood of Phoenix, Vegas, those areas where they're heavy blue, and then we'll bring them in late because we already have a precedent set that we can bring in these ballots late if need be. Now you don't have to actually have proof that anyone stayed home, but you have the narrative from the authorities, and their intel is always right, don't you know? They did, after all, arrest somebody on October 7th. They said something was going to happen on October 7th, even though they pre-planned the arrest for October 7th. That seems like a very plausible theory to me, but, I am an agave.
Well, for everybody listening, Steve has been pulling this thread for quite a while. In our back channels, he's texted about it for months at least. Like, hey, do you guys think they're gonna pull something about the election like ahead of time? And then, oh look, it's almost as if they hacked into our communications and were like, hey, that's a good idea. Let's put out a memo.
I spoke it into existence.
Yeah, right before the election happens. But you know what it is in reality is that Steve understands what's happening here. He understands that your government aren't actually your friend. They aren't actually on your side. They are a hammer, and everything that gets in their way is a nail, to include election integrity. And then, if you question it, no, now Garrett, not only is he a Bible thumping First Amendment believing Christian, he's a conspiracy theorist and an extremist, because we're the government and we get to dictate who is and who isn't. It's really frustrating because especially in this era that we have, like, look at us. You're in Florida, I'm in Wisconsin. We got people all over the place joining us live on Rumble, hopefully. And if not, you're listening to us in the future on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, or even on YouTube these days. And we have this freedom to be able to do this for now. I told somebody recently that your First Amendment rights are only powerful if you use them. And it's absolutely the case. It's also the case with your other rights, like calling your government to task when things don't seem right, even if they're going to gaslight you into, saying that you're an extremist, you're this, that, or the other thing. And, or the best one, you're a Nazi because you might support Donald Trump. And on top of it, which also, if you're not on X, you have to get on X. No more legacy media garbage. Whatever is important in legacy media, you'll see there, because somebody will clip it and then put some commentary about it. But there is already troves of videos from places like Pennsylvania and elsewhere of people posing as pollster or as poll workers when they aren't, of police officers saying, no, you can't vote, it's too busy, so we're shutting it down. So the government is already, and other bad actors are already trying to interfere, because there's been this big push for the early vote, especially from the Republican side, which is typically a Democrat thing. So they're adjusting their playbook. Well, maybe it's because the Republican Party is basically the Democrat Party of, like, I don't know, the early 2000s. and so
they'd still sign on to the Patriot Act.
Yeah. So it's already happening. But I bet a lot of people don't even know that, like, because you got to go, see these videos that are getting,
or you just are beaten over the head with, if you believe that you're a conspiracy theorist, if you're seeking that information, you're definitely into conspiracies, and just ignore your lying eyes. And let's actually pivot, because I have the video. We're talking about video. Let's pivot to a different topic, though. We'll come off of the intelligence community and our ex-girlfriend over at the FBI. But don't worry, we'll be back to them. But I found this one yesterday and blew my mind. And I saw the video and I said, I got to show this to my good friend Garrett. And beforehand, make sure that he turns down the dial on the O'Boyle meter. I want it set to 0.
Okay. We're dialing back.
So I have a video from this, and this is a Arizona grandmother who was falsely arrested by the United States Marshals. We'll give a little more information about the story, but first let's just watch the arrest video, and then we'll.
You already know this is going to get my goat, because I am no fan of false arrests.
Federal agents falsely arrested a 66-year-old Valley woman at gunpoint. The ABC 15 investigators are first to have exclusive new video of the shocking arrest. We broke the story and now have the footage, prompting more questions about this wild case of mistaken identity.
Police, don't move! It took the federal government more than 6 months to publicly release this dramatic video. Hands up! Hands up! Revealing visuals highlighting a significant error by U.S. Marshals. Turn around. And it also proves what 66-year-old Penny McCarthy knew all along.
Ever since this happened, sorry, I am so freaking disappointed in my government. It's not funny.
Turn away from the sound of my voice. This exclusive new police body camera footage captures the moment 6 U.S. Marshals, armed with rifles, wrongfully arrested Penny outside her Phoenix home.
You have an arrest warrant. Turn away from the sound of my voice. Yes, for you.
Who am I?
Turn away. Turn around. We'll discuss.
Turn away. You're gonna get hit.
The video clearly shows Penny had no idea why federal agents were there or how they could have a warrant for her arrest.
I truly, truly believed I was being kidnapped.
Do you want to confirm who I am?
ABC 15 fought for 6 months to obtain these videos through a federal public records request. The first time we're seeing exactly what led to Penny's arrest.
Turn around and face away from me.
And it all happened in less than 2 minutes.
Can you prove you're the
Ma'am, you see that we're the police.
How do I see that?
Ma'am, we're gonna get, if you turn around and
What was it like watching this video?
It just makes me more angry than before.
All right, pause it right there. So Garrett, for those who are listening, the display of this video is really weird. They are recording the video playing on a laptop. I don't know if that's for style or if maybe they're actually restricted to you can only use this laptop to play the video because they fought for 6 months to get that. But she's an elderly woman who's out there, and the marshals come up with long guns and are screaming and threatening to hit her if she doesn't comply. And if you go and further into that video, she says, I honestly thought I was getting kidnapped and I thought it was a ruse to kidnap me. So I got really scared and clammed up that way. And the story itself where I originally found it came from the New York Post. And just to add a little bit more color before we explode entirely on that. Her name's Penny McCarthy. She was going about her day at home outside Phoenix on March 5th when a van full of people claiming to be U.S. Marshals pulled up, pointed heavy rifles in her face, telling her she was under arrest. McCarthy, astonished, asked them to verify that they had the right person, pleading with them to just tell me who I am. But the officers refused and instead yelled at her to give herself up. Can you prove you're the police? She asked, but the officers refused to even show any identification or warrant until she was allowed herself to be cuffed. Eventually, McCarthy allowed the officers to detain her, and they insisted she was a 70-year-old Oklahoma woman named Carol Ann Rosick, who skipped out on her probation in 1999 after being jailed for a series of non-violent crimes. Even though McCarthy denied being Rosick and said she could prove it, the U.S. Marshals did not allow her and instead took her into custody. She was thrown in a federal jail for a night, but was sprung the next day after prosecutors presented little evidence beyond Facebook posts that a probation office in Oklahoma thought indicated she really was Rosick living under an alias.
You know, Steve,
monumental failure. Every single person with this, it's not, hey, people aren't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, if you make yes, you can make a mistake. Yep. You could arrest the wrong person.
It happens sometimes.
But you don't conduct yourself that way with that person for those charges. A probation violation that's 25 years old, and you had to send a TAC team to get her?
Mm-hmm. And you roll up on her like it's like you are about to kidnap her. I mean, if for those watching, you saw the video, they show it. They're in their SUV or whatever with their M4s, and they roll up to her on the side of the road, and they open the doors and point the guns at her and tell her not to. Where's she going to go? This is one of those where this truly is a monumental failure. So I hadn't seen this video. I wasn't even aware of this story until just now. And Steve's absolutely right to have dialed me back in the beginning because I want to blow a freaking gasket here. Because as guys who used to be cops, who then were FBI agents, who then were FBI SWAT, I have all sorts of things going on in my brain causing me just to wonder how it got to this point. And nobody involved along this whole course of events that led to this said, hey, maybe, just maybe, there's a better way. They obviously know where she's at, the woman who they think is some other woman. So one, how did it get there? How did you mistake so early on where you're like, no, this is the woman, and nobody verified that it was the woman? I don't know how you even get to this point to begin with, but let's say by some type of ineptitude, I really don't know what else it would be other than ineptitude. You get to this point where like, okay, we're going to do the arrest, and you come up with your ops plan, your FD 888, because the U.S. Marshals are a federal law enforcement agency, so they got to do an ops plan just like we had to do in the FBI, just like the DEA would have to do, or the ATF. And this is the plan you come up with? Because what? She's some violent offender? You know, I said it earlier, having not known this story, having not knowing it was coming, that they are a hammer and everything is a nail. And this is a primary example of that. And quite frankly, this is a primary example of, oh, let me read you some words. Maybe you'll have an idea where they come from. And I quote, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Does that sound familiar? Or is that just the words of a rambling extremist? She said it herself. I am so disappointed in my government. Yeah, how can you not be? Dude,
You
it's
only get to that result by compounding mistake on mistake on mistake, and nobody in the room thinking through a better option. Because yes, you can make a mistaken identity. That happens. And
Mhm.
that's why we have qualified immunity. That's why you don't go to jail for making that mistake. But then there's the added mistake of we're gonna come in hard on her because that's justified. Let's just say for a minute that she actually was the living under an alias on a probation violation for non-violent crimes. Okay, good on you. You locate her like a bloodhound. Great job. You can issue the press release tomorrow, US Marshals, how great a
Mhm.
job you did at sniffing her out. Use the online, the cyber aspect to it, and then you went and sent the guys to do it. The guys and gals that went to go do it don't need to be kitted up to do it. She's a 66-year-old elderly woman for non-violent crimes. You can
Right.
just knock on her door. That's pretty easy, but
Yep.
that can happen. And then because you come in so hard and you get her disoriented, which was your intent, you threaten her beyond just putting a long gun in her face. The female says, "You're going to comply or you're going to get hit."
Right.
She has a taser. She's going to tase her for not turning around when it is a situation of panic. It's fight or flight or freeze, and she
Yeah, she's
froze. I
froze.
mean, it's
She's frozen. Yeah.
I mean, it's unrelated, but I remember being on a SWAT hit where we had the guy calling him out, and he was too long to come to the door. So we were preparing to enter, and we threw the flashbang. And at that exact moment, he
He opened.
stepped out, and the flashbang went off. All right, it's funny as heck because he was a dirty dude, but he couldn't hear.
Oh.
He was deaf for momentarily deaf, and the guys were screaming at him like, "Get down, get down!" I'm like, he doesn't know what you're saying,
Mhm.
and that's how bad things happen.
That is how
But
bad things happen.
that was a recipe for that woman to wind up dead
Mhm.
for a probation violation on a nonviolent crime. And there's a reason that they fought for 6 months to
Right.
prevent that body cam from coming out.
Yep. Eh,
Every single person there needs to lose their job. They need to be prosecuted for a color of law violation. They need to be in prison for that.
I concur, and I
They
don't
can't
care how.
undo that to her. She's
Right.
traumatized.
She's traumatized, and that was clear. That was clear from the little piece of the interview of her, that it's clear that she's traumatized, and of course she is. And for those who didn't watch, if you're not gonna go back and watch, I mean, I'll explain it to you. An I mean, she's an elderly woman. She's a typical American, so a little on the heavier side. I wouldn't say like full blown obese for a 66-year-old, but she's not moving around briskly or
She has
swiftly.
flip-flops on.
Yes, and she's just standing there, and you could hear it in her voice that she's shocked.
It's a
So she.
sliding door van too that is perfect kidnap vehicle,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of old school when they're driving around in the van and kidnapping all the pledges. But it is like that. You roll up and you open the van door, which, quite frankly, a sliding door van, those can be a very useful tool in a law enforcement capacity, because you could slide that door open and whatever. We don't need to get into all that. But she she's frozen there on the sidewalk, like her hands. She's not a threat to anybody, and then you have the hammers coming out like a hammer, and it's like, i I do struggle, and I chalk it up to my time as a cop, but maybe I'm wrong there, because I think of some former colleagues from that piece of my life who shouldn't have been in the position. They didn't know how to talk to people, they didn't know how to handle people, they often were escalating things when they didn't need to be escalated just because of their own actions. When you're the law enforcement officer, you should know that you're in control, and you should be confident enough in your training and experience, in your abilities and capabilities, to keep the situation under control. You're the one who's armed to the teeth. I mean, you got an AR-15, an M4. whatever type of version of the carbine pattern rifle that they have. And this woman is just and you're gonna ramp it up by threatening her that she's gonna get hit with the taser when you can just go hands on right here. Just one of you walk out with your M4, and then the other two of you come out, or however many, and take her into custody. Put her in handcuffs. She's not fighting anybody.
They were
She's not
giving
resisting.
instructions like there was a defensive tactics class that people who had never engaged in that. Those very turn around, listen to the sound of my voice. It's not a felony traffic stop. It's an
Right.
old woman on a sidewalk. Just
Yes.
get out there and actually be the police for once.
Mm-hmm. And again, I harken back to that. How many times, Steve? And I know you've done it a lot, and because you did it a lot in the FBI, you did it way more than most people. But when you take someone into custody, how often do you have to use force, even like verbal, like that? In my
Never.
experience, it wasn't very often. It
Almost
was,
never.
yeah. Like, yes, it happens. I've been in use of forces before. I've had to use the taser before. I've had to draw my gun and point it before. Thankfully, I never had to shoot anybody in any of my law enforcement, capacities. But by and large, if you're just a normal person, talking normal, talking casually, keeping them informed, treating them like a human being, by and large, people will comply. And yes, you always have to be ready for them not to, but that's on you. And just even if you're just talking casually and normally, that doesn't mean that you aren't ready for battle. That doesn't mean that you aren't ready to fight.
How
But
about they sent a team based on Facebook posts? That's it. They got spun up over that. And then the U.S. Attorney's Office went in there to a judge and thought that that was sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many fails here. I mean, gosh,
So many. And you mentioned it about them having to be charged for color of law. Like, I don't care how much they would claim this was just a mistake. If it was just a mistake, you don't fight for 6 months to not release the video. You just own it. Why is our government incapable of that? Of owning when they are wrong? It's the hubris. We talk about it all the time.
And if they would own it and actually say, look, we're not perfect, I think you'd get a lot more grace than people are willing to give you now, because you insist that you're the arbiter of truth, which is why the intelligence communities are saying that these threats are here because these people are questioning the outcomes of our sacred democracy. All right, let's get to another one, because we got to share the hate. And let's go to the most dangerous agency, department, I guess, because it's larger than that, I contend, in the government. It's not the FBI. It's the Department of Homeland Security, because they don't even have to be weaponized. They could just not do their job and endanger all of us, as they did here. This comes from the Washington Times. Stunning security failure. U.S. agents miss Venezuelan gang tattoos and scan for refugee approvals. The Department of Homeland Security greenlit refugee applications for Venezuelan gang members, Tren de Aragua, after the immigration officers failed to spot their gang tattoos. That's basically what you do during the screening process.
Yeah.
NBC News reported this week, Homeland Security had identified 100 migrants who were known TDA members and 500 more who may be connected to the gang. Some outside experts suspect the number is much higher.
Yes, no kidding. Of course it's higher. It's always higher. So we got 600 that we know of. So let's call it, I don't know, probably twice that at least. 1,200.
You didn't see the teardrop tattoo, just didn't, whatever their affiliate markings are that you would be searching for as someone who goes through that. That's one of the things that you have at your disposal. It's not like a rarely used tool. Tattoo searching is standard for any sort of identification.
Yep. I mean, again,
it would even be for that elderly woman. Hey, does our 70-year-old woman have a tattoo that we could verify or not?
Mm-hmm.
Normal.
Yeah, it is normal. It's normal. And like, again, I go back to my cop days. You would document tattoos of people, and sometimes you would identify them if they're not going to tell you their name, or they're like, oh yeah, I know this guy, he's got that tattoo or whatever. But definitely if you're screening people, and sometimes like if you thought it was like a gang tattoo, maybe you'd go talk to a detective and say, hey, this tattoo stood out to me for whatever reason. This was the type of behavior they were involved in. But in this scenario, how is everyone in this role of doing this vetting they've got to be aware. They've got to have had some training on what these tattoos are. And,
Yeah, but
you know,
they would have deprived the Biden administration of another 600 aliens to bring into the country. They don't want to
it's,
stand up and do their job. This is why they're the most dangerous. They don't have the same guardrails that the FBI does. And the FBI doesn't obey those guardrails. But theoretically, they have the guardrails of the Domestic Investigations Operations Guide, the Attorney General Guideline for Domestic Investigations, the DIOG, and the HEG DOM, which take the Constitution and even limit it even more to what you can do. Department of Homeland Security does not have that. But beyond that, beyond their ability to be weaponized, beyond the ability to, well, I've had conversations with DHS guys who said, yeah, he flies. I'm going to pull him and I'm just going to take his phone because he has no expectation. I can just scan his phone for you. That's why the task force has to be done away with, because I could have used that to get around the Fourth Amendment. But if they don't even do their job and they just sit there and put their hands in their pockets and let 50 million illegals walk through, you're going to have some Tren de Araguas in the country, but they're only taking over maybe a few of these apartment complexes. Nothing major, of course.
yeah, no big deal. What was that one legacy media? She was interviewing JD Vance about this, and she was like, it just
Do you even hear yourself, Martha?
yeah. And she's like, it's just a couple. Just okay. Well, how many apartment complexes is too many?
Yeah.
And it's like, I just don't get all of these freaking shills that hold water when for the
Because they
government.
want their lettuce picked. That's
Yeah.
what they view these people as. Chattel who can do the landscaping and raise their kids for them and pick the crops. And then they're going to reliably vote for the politician who did it and brought them in. It's all wins here. And then you have a Republican Party that says, well, we're beholden to our donors and our donors want cheap labor. And you know what we should do? We should create a giant problem that only we can solve. And you know what? Even us, the problem is just so big. They've got roots here now. They've had families. They have jobs. We just better give them all amnesty. Get ready. This is not what our topic is today. People need to get ready, not for the politicians. They themselves need to get ready to gird their loins because the messaging is going to come out. It's already starting. You can't break up families. How can you be heartless? Yes, they all need to go away.
Yep.
Every one of them. They can deport together, all of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not heartless for saying that.
No.
Do you think that Saudi Arabia doesn't protect its borders from Palestine?
100% they do.
It requires violence.
Even Mexico has illegal immigration laws. You know, like it's so crazy. And also, let's not forget, and because liberals will they've been,
the sob stories are coming.
But
you know what? Border sovereignty looks a lot like an angry 18-year-old with testosterone flowing through him that we put on a multicam uniform on top of a Humvee with a 50 cal. And if you come to the border, finger goes to the trigger. We don't even give you a bottle of water for the return trip because the moment we do that, it incentivizes more.
Yep. I agree. Like you gotta come down hard on when you're breaking our laws. And that's what this boils down to is a nation is not a nation without borders. A nation is not a nation without laws. And they're fundamentally trying to destroy both, especially in regards to quote unquote immigration. No, it's illegal activity is what it is. We're not talking about you're coming with intent, trying to get a green card, trying to become a citizen. And quite frankly, most of those legal immigrants would agree with our stance on this. And then on top of it, nobody's picking your lettuce if they're coming from Tren de Agua or however you say the gang. You know, it's a Venezuelan gang, and DHS just missed at least 600 of them, which is like a medium-sized infantry battalion. And the majority of these people in this gang are, guess what? Military-age males. But oh no, Steve, you're lacking compassion. You're lacking compassion.
I have the most compassion. My plan has the most compassion. You're not going to have any women trafficked under my plan. They won't
Or
come.
kids. Yep.
All right, let's go to this one. This one's a little bit lighthearted. The consequences are massive, or could have been, but we still just have to laugh because government is incompetent people doing incompetent things incompetently. Let's spread the hate to the U.S. Secret Service. Back in the news again, this time for using Strava. Strava using Secret Service agents inadvertently tip off fitness app users to the movements of Trump, Biden, and Harris.
That's funny.
Strava, which is used by 120 million people around the world, allows runners and cyclists to log and share their workouts online. Recent investigation by this group called Le Monde found some Secret Service agents active on the app, including in the weeks after the 2 assassination attempts of Trump. In one instance, an agent assigned to Biden went for a jog, traced his route during the president's 2023 trip to San Francisco, and Le Monde was able to determine the hotel Biden was staying at. Le Monde found that the movements of former First Lady Melania Trump and current First Lady Jill Biden could also be tracked based on the Secret Service agents using Strava. In total, Le Monde found 26 Secret Service agents on Strava sharing their movements during official business. They're allowed to maintain their own social media accounts in private. I think it's kind of unprofessional if you deal in that sort of space to give your location, even if you're off duty. But you got to be kidding me, man. Like, you're supposed to be the best protection detail, best funded, best trained, and you're giving your locations and don't think that it's ever going to come to light.
Dude, it's again, it's why this is titled Monumental
Hubris.
Failure. Dude, the hubris is crazy.
I don't hate them working out, but I don't know why you need to have reassurance from your social media following that how far you went running or rode a bike. Like, come on, you're supposed to be a higher level person than that. You have your own self-confidence. If you want to do a pool within your own squad or detail, it'd be like, hey, let's see who can run the most miles this month.
Yeah.
Okay. Accountability. I get it. Some people need that extra motivation.
Also, can't you make this stuff private on the app? I would imagine you could. I don't know. I don't use Strava, but
yeah, don't use your name. And underneath it say like works for the US government.
Yes. Yeah. As you're going through this, I was like, this sounds really familiar. And I didn't have a lot of time to look, but I thought I heard something like this when I was deployed, which
there was in that article. They said that the Pentagon had to stop it from happening because they were giving the locations of the ops out.
Yeah. Okay. And then I did a quick search. I couldn't find that piece specifically, but here's this from back in 2018. Strava strikes again, or I guess now they strike again. And this was the first time when we saw it. And it says fitness app Strava lights up staff at military bases. And here's the image from
the
Strava.
perimeter.
Yeah. It's the movement. Okay. Yeah. This is it. This is Bagram Air Base, which we, gave back to the Taliban, by the way. But security concerns have been raised after a fitness tracking firm showed the exercise routes of military personnel in bases around the world. And they basically map the base. And, although the Taliban I fought against were still wearing like flip-flops and using old AK-47s, the internet's everywhere. And, ISIS was really good at using the internet. And maybe the fragment of them that's left still are, I don't know, but people adapt, and that includes our enemies. And so a savvy enemy is going to be able to be like, oh, here's the map of the base we want to bomb. Like, and now here you go. You have the Secret Service meddling with Strava too, and giving out routes and whatnot. Just, it's endless failure by your government.
Oh, we're far from the end here, my friend. Let's go back to the ex-girlfriend for this one, which was a revelation by a friend of ours, Carrie Pickett at Washington Times. Back to Washington Times. I wish she wrote for a bigger outlet that would get more attention on this, because this one needs to be the story of the year for 2024. This is the election story, even though it's a little bit dated. Whistleblower. James Comey had the FBI honeypot spies infiltrate Trump's 2016 campaign. Thank you very much, Mr. Whistleblower, for waiting, 9 years to come out with this. Did you keep this one in the back pocket to retire, or did you just get jammed up and now have it? Your information is more stale than Vindman's, but we'll take what we can get, I guess. The whistleblower disclosure said that 2 female FBI undercover agents, again, as a father of daughters, Garrett, could you ever imagine the FBI director going to your daughter and saying, hey, I really need you to get into the Trump campaign and bang one of his top aides, and them going along with it? But that's an aside. The FBI undercover agents successfully infiltrated Trump's 2016 campaign at high levels and directed to act as honeypots while traveling with Trump and his campaign staff. This agent personally knew that Comey ordered an FBI investigation against Trump and that Comey personally directed it. It was an off-the-books investigation and did not appear to target any specific crime, but was more of what agents would describe as a fishing expedition to find something incriminating about Mr. Trump. Show me the man, I will find you the crime. The undercover honeypot agents targeted Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, so he told them who specifically to go and engage in sexual activity with. The undercover operation, according to the whistleblower, was hidden from the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, who wouldn't have done anything no matter what. But they didn't tell Horowitz, who, when he was investigating the misconduct about the Crossfire Hurricane case. This one they kept secret because it was off the books. The FBI whistleblower said that the off-the-books investigation was closed because a newspaper obtained a photograph of one of the undercover agents and was about to publish it. So they sent her over to the CIA so she couldn't testify. She couldn't be compelled to testify as a potential witness. And then they promoted the other female agent to now a high-level FBI executive position.
You know, Steve, I'm not surprised by this. Is anybody, seriously, in 2024, is anybody surprised by this? I'm with you, though. Like, hey, Mr. Whistleblower, or maybe Mrs. Whistleblower, I don't know. Why'd you wait so long? Like, there was enough meddling in the election by the FBI back, 2020 and 2016. And now, like, we're just learning about this now. Like, the damage is done. The damage is already done. And since I have it up still, do I have it up still? I thought I did. Where'd it go? Right here. Declaration of Independence again. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. And I would extend that to a James Comey, a white guy for Harris. I think he's like the founding member of that. And
he's with her.
Yeah. And our princes, so our high level bureaucrats like a Jim Comey, they are tyrants, plain and simple. Like,
so this was the director of the FBI using the power at his hands off the books for personal reasons. It's not off the books. You can have a classification if it's got to be kept secret, but he did it off the books, so there would be no accountability. That's a color of law violation. He used those resources improperly. And he did it not for any particular crime or any suspicion of crime. He can't even say it was for intelligence. It was to see if we can drum up something. Now, the question then is, was that going to be an October surprise that they could then have a tit for tat with Hillary Clinton and her server? Or more likely, in the unlikely event that he did win, because remember, it was like 99% chance that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. Well, now I have D-Rog on the president.
I mean,
J. Edgar Hoover style.
Yeah, that's it.
There's no doubt, no downside because there's no accountability ever.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the criminal indictment against James Comey right now?
Yep.
Now.
Great question. Where is it? When is it coming? Why hasn't it happened yet? And he's going to, talk about government hubris. Gosh, he's one of the worst, one of the absolute worst, as far as I'm concerned. That
my favorite comment about James Comey is his favorite thing to do is to wake up in the middle of the night and creep down to his kitchen for a midnight snack. So when he opens the refrigerator, all the spotlights are on him.
He doesn't even try.
Self-aggrandizing jackass.
He doesn't even try to hide it, Golly, like it just. But yeah, like what's going to happen to him? He's probably going to get another book deal and get fluffed up on CNN, and there will be people who cheer this and say that's exactly what we need. That's what we needed in an FBI director. I mean, think of that. Like, just think of this stage. You've got FBI agents honeypotted against a president and against his campaign.
And they went willingly and did it.
Yeah, and
those females did it. They didn't come forward and say, hey, this is not only off the books, but it's asking me to engage in an activity which is inappropriate, unprofessional, unethical.
Right. And maybe even illegal. But I'm just
they were rewarded.
I'm just following orders.
They were rewarded. CIA, high-level executives. We need to find out who these gals are.
Mm-hmm.
That's our next mission. We're gonna.
This whistleblower's got to know. Oh, maybe not, but if they know this much,
we think we have an in to this whistleblower, by the
Good.
way. It's just
Good.
so we're going to try to reach out to him, her, they, themselves to find out if we can really get some more information. I got one more, and I want to definitely leave time for a nice palate cleanse. Let's just do it real quick. And it's again, it's our ex-girlfriend, and it was revealed Democrat donating FBI agent hunted J6 protest cases. And our bad guy's name is FBI Special Agent Clark G. Burns. Clark Burns works for the Washington field office. He's written numerous affidavits in cases related to the January 6th investigation. He's made 152 political donations totaling $7,100 through Act Blue.
Wow.
And 9 of his donations went to Biden for president. Burns contributed to the 2020 primary presidential campaign for Pete Buttigieg, the rear admiral. And FBI agent made 6 donations totaling $1,000 to the Lincoln Project, the anti-Trump PAC. He made one of the donations 4 days after the events of January 6th. One case which he was involved in involved Owen Schroyer. And another one was Brandon Prenslin, former employee of the Freedom Works. That's a conservative organization. But he doesn't have a conflict of interest. He's just doing that in his personal capacity. He can certainly check his beliefs at the door.
Sure. You know what's funny about this, and funny in a despotic type of way, is that our friend Marcus Allen had his clearance suspended for engaging in conspiracy theories, right? And then, of
Revoked.
course, in the quiet, and then revoked, and then in the quiet of night, it was reinstated, over a year later, and because not that the FBI would ever apologize because they lied, because he wasn't actually engaging in conspiracy theories. He was legitimately 100% doing his job essentially as an analyst to send open source information to his squad, which is what he did. And he gets suspended for engaging in conspiracy theories. And now you have this guy, Agent Burns, who donated to the Lincoln Project, who legitimately engages in misinformation. They lie about all sorts of DEI slavery topics.
Act Blue isn't involved in anything nefarious either.
Yeah.
Where they're getting 58 contributions a day in small dollar increments from these people that have no idea. They're claiming that they're making the donations and they're just using their identities.
Yeah, I think you said 152 donations. That's insane.
152 donations, $7,100, and FBI agents are notoriously cheap. So he's a true believer.
Yep. And I mean, I just think of like how many times did I donate to anything outside of church when I was an FBI agent, or even still, or even when I was a cop? Never. Like I don't donate to politicians. And when you're an FBI agent, I'm not saying like you can't, but I do think that very few can delineate between their personal beliefs and properly.
You just don't want to
their
have
job.
the appearance. You don't want to have to go
Right.
into court and have that be a matter of public record, like somebody, Kyle Seraphin, could find it in about 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's brought up when you're testifying in court. Just like you shouldn't be strapping on an app when you're running and protecting the president at the same time. It's unprofessional.
Mm-hmm.
You can have the political beliefs you want. This guy's a vile, vicious, Marxist, godless communist. So I don't think I'd get along with him very much.
No, he's your
He
standard.
gleefully
FBI
was going after these cases.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question about
No,
that.
no doubt. He thinks that every J6er from and look, we've made this clear plenty of times. There are people who engaged in activity on January 6th that should be arrested. They engage in illegal activity. Does that include the grandma behind the velvet rope who walked in after the fracas was over? And it seemed like there was a tour because Capitol police officers were escorting people around and telling them, oh, you can't go that way, but yeah, go ahead and go this way. Because a guy like Clark, he's going to go after her, that grandma, just as much as he's going to go after someone who legitimately broke the law. It's just, and that's your FBI. That's your FBI. That's why Steve and I are sitting here, is because your FBI retaliates against people who don't toe the line for the regime. Plain and simple.
Monumental failures across the board. All right. We have a palate cleanse, but want to give you a minute or two here, Garrett. Why don't you share your biblical worldview with us so we can actually feel something a little bit better. But my palate cleanse is going to be good too.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to the Gospel of John today because especially with a topic like this, with this monumental failure by government and during an election season, I think, at least for me, this recently hearkened as a good reminder. And for those not familiar, this is coming towards the end of Christ's time on earth. His earthly ministry is coming to an end. He's before the government officials already, and one of them is a guy named Pontius Pilate. And I mean, this is in John 19, and it's getting really just a few verses later is when it gets into the crucifixion. But in verse, let's start in verse 8. It says, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, you will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you? Jesus answered him, you would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin. And I bring that up because Christ knew that all these happenings were from God the Father, that the whole purpose of his mission on earth was to eventually get crucified. Jesus knew that, and he knew that it was time that this was it. But Pilate thought that he had the authority himself and that he was in this position. And you see the hubris that we talk about right here. Do you not know that I have authority to release you or to kill you? And it's a good reminder, especially for a late stage democracy or a late stage republic that I truly do believe that we are in. It's okay. It's okay because as time marches on, God ultimately is in control, and what is happening is eventually being orchestrated for his purposes. We don't know them always. Oftentimes, hopefully we can look back and say, okay, I think I have an idea, even though it can be difficult in the middle of it. And so hopefully that's encouraging to you too, that the authority that your government has, it's not theirs. It's given to them for a time, for some ultimate purpose that maybe we'll figure out someday.
And to the palate cleanse, Garrett's been harping for a couple weeks that his greatest wish outside of ending world hunger and achieving world peace would be a Donald Trump impression.
Oh, it'd be great.
I did not find one of those. There's a lot of them out there. I couldn't pick a favorite, but if I had an impression that I wanted, I would want this guy's skills. This is Pablo Francisco, and we'll give him a play, and then we'll send you off on your day.
With that voice, he can take any topic, regardless what it is, and make it cool.
In the city, you must fight to survive. He sold tortillas on the corner. And the mob wanted in.
I don't know who this guy is, but I want him and his tortillas. I want him.
He had one chance, and his chance was to fight back Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Listen to me. These are my tortillas, and I'm not going to get them up here. You have to get out of here. They're trying to kill you. Get out. Get out.
Double the action. Triple the excitement.
Get down.
More of the excitement.
Get down again.
They didn't know who he was.
Mijito, who are those men who came here? What did they want? Listen to me, Corina. You have to get out of here. They're trying to take my tortilla.
One man, one solution. Arnold Schwarzenegger, this summer is Little Tortilla Boy.
Thank you so much, everybody.
That is epic.
He is extremely talented, and I've been watching that guy's stuff for a while. He does a great Keanu Reeves as well. But Pablo Francisco, look him up, guys, if you get a chance. He's all over social media. Been doing it for a hot minute. He loves that movie announcer voice. He says he goes to see the movies just to see the previews. All right. That's going to do it for us today, guys, on the American Radicals podcast. I want to thank you all for joining us. We'll be back with you again on Saturday, noontime start. Until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/AmRadPod.